welcome to my poster presentation for the International Conference of Roman Bioarchaeology. I'm Leon Corneille-Cowell, and this study is on um, climate change and the effect it had on health, specifically looking at skeletal health. And I've covered two specific periods: the Roman warm period, which was a kind of warm um, wet climatic period in Europe and Asia that lasted roughly from 300 BCE to 400 CE. And then I'm comparing that to populations in the late antiquity, Little Ice Age, which lasted from roughly 400 to 900 CE. Now, it's worth noting that these are rough roundups rather than definitive time periods because no one actually can agree on when the time periods start, and lots of different evidences types contradict each other. So I've just kind of rounded these up into two easy to compare periods. And this is a database study um, using data from, in total, 229 archaeological sites in Britain. And of those, there was 133 Roman and 96 from the late antiquity, Little Ice Age. And in total, there was 12,829 human remains. So the first piece of analysis I've done, which is figure 3, was comparing the two periods, kind of crude prevalence rate and also age distribution by separating out non-adults. And we had a fairly large and statistically significant difference for both types with and without non-adults. This is interesting. This shows there's definitely a pattern. Whether it's purely climatic is another question. I did look at, for example, changes in house type. However, I found that house types, so was talking about Grubenhaus here, or pit buildings, were actually present throughout the Iron Age and Roman period, so that I dismissed this idea pretty quickly. Um, but currently, it is looking like the colder climate caused more cases of maxillary sinusitis, which is what I'm studying, if I didn't mention that already. But then obviously you have the osteological paradox, which would mean the opposite, and it would mean that the people in the late antiquity, Little Ice Age, were actually more resilient. And then another type of analysis I've done is I've looked at the sex distribution. Now, in both cases, there were more males than females. However, it wasn't a significant amount statistically, um, which is interesting because in other literature, there were markedly more females. And in modern data, more females are getting respiratory conditions such as sinusitis. I did consider things such as um, like sex-based division of labor, but quickly kind of dismissed this because, like I said, there's no distinct difference between the two of them. Then I moved on to kind of looking at urban and rural settlement types and if there was any difference. And this is interesting because in the Roman warm period, we had kind of almost equal amounts of sinusitis in both. Um, but um, in the late antiquity, Little Ice Age, we have a lot more urban. But the caveat with this is that a lot of these come from one very large site, which is Lincoln East Bypass. Um, and if you remove Lincoln East Bypass, rather than there being 189 cases, there's only 5. And I think this, you could look at hygiene and pollution, but I think this is likely caused by the kind of deurbanization of Britain um, that was happening around that time. And then the next thing I did, and this is very experimental, was to try and kind of map the cases chronologically. So if you look at this figure 7 and figure 8, the um, the bottom axis is the date of the sites, whether it's been radiocarbon dated or dated relatively through artifacts. And then the other axis is the percentage of maxillary sinusitis on the site. And this was very experimental, I must say, and I haven't found it to be massively conclusive. Although I do think the second to and third centuries have quite a lot of cases, which is interesting because there was droughts recorded during this period, so you will have had arid weather that would have dried out the mucosa and caused sinusitis. And on the other side, in the fifth and sixth centuries, you had um, historically recorded volcanic activity causing dust clouds, which may have been inhaled by people. Um, and then finally, we go on to the maps. And once again, not very conclusive, but there is a lot of cases kind of here in the northeast and in the East Midlands, which I would link possibly to that area being blocked from the Gulf Stream by the Pennines and being quite a dry area compared to the west of the country, but also being cold due to the North Sea winds. But this is very speculative, and I don't think you can make any conclusive statement on either this one or the one before. But overall, I think there is links between climate and sinusitis, whether it's cold weather causing the mucus to dry out or responses to cold weather through um, exposure to smoke and sitting closer to fires, or whether it's hot weather causing the mucus to dry out. This is still, as of this recording, a work in progress. Um, I encourage anyone, if you have any suggestions, to reach out, and I will be at other conferences presenting this. So come and speak to me if you can. Um, the hope is, I think, from this, there are other alleys of research on climate that can be done, especially using paleopathology. And I hope to continue to do that in the future. Um, but yeah, thank you for watching. And that's everything from me.